I just read your Forbes article this morning, and I know in my experience, trust seems to be such an important part of success. For a teacher, building trust with the classroom, all the research says that when there's a trusting relationship between a student and a teacher, the academic results are crazy good and far exceed anything that people expect. And also, there's a personal growth part that comes with that trust. Right? It's beyond what most people understand. Can you talk a little bit about trust?
Well, I could talk a lot about trust. The hard part is talking a little bit about trust. But as I start my article, and I said sooner or later, every leader, I'm talking about corporate leaders, but every leader realizes that the vast majority of people that he depends on for success do not report to him. So even if you take someone like Jeff Immelt, who runs General Electric, he's the CEO, and let's even assume that it's the old days when all he had to do was say jump and everybody would say how high. In my experience, that's not like that in business anymore, but let's assume it was. Even so, even if there's 30,000 or 300,000 employees at GE that he could fire like that, what percentage those are very few of the people he needs to be successful. He's got boards of directors. He's got tens of thousands of stockholders. He's got hundreds of millions of customers. He's got vendors. He's got government regulators. He's got politicians. He's got the financial press. He's got Wall Street. All of these people far outnumber the people he can actively control, either directly or indirectly. So how do we control? People are the most important thing in our environment. Students, through persuasion. But power, it requires persuasive ability, and persuasion requires trust. The more someone trusts you, the more easily you're going to be able to persuade them to your point of view or whatever you're trying to accomplish and get their help for it. Trust is the most powerful form of capital there is, more important than any kind of amount of money. And interestingly about trust, it's an intangible asset. There's no limit. You can have more of it than you need. Warren Buffett has built his entire career around, and his $37 billion around trust. And unfortunately, it's also a very, very fragile asset. So once you damage or lose this asset, you may not be able to get it back. So it's important to develop the habits that engender trust. Each one of us has, we may not like business and don't like business talking, but forget about it. Everybody has a brand. It's in business, it's called a brand. In your personal life or in your professional life, it's called your reputation. And there's absolutely nothing more important than that for your long-term success. So you have to do all the things that build trust and stay away from all the things that damage trust. And again, I would say, then going back to your earlier question, Pete, the most difficult thing, the reason why we consistently damage our reputations is because we're fearful and we do things in the short term. We try to cut corners or get away with something because we're scared. And we're not evil, we're just scared. And so we try to cut a corner, and the next thing you know, the whole thing comes crashing down on us, and we've damaged our reputations, and it's very, very hard to get back from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read an article in the Harvard Business Review that 65% of employees don't trust their managers and supervisors, and the main reason that they gave for that was that they do one thing or say one thing and do another.
Absolutely. And of course, the first place that it starts is self-awareness and self-knowledge. I've been around, but God, I forget, I lost count of how many corporations I was in and how many bosses I had and how many people I bossed and everything. But, a lot of times you're not even aware of the fact that you're saying one thing. Look at your children, the way you deal with your children, and some little 4-year-old finally says, well, how come, Daddy, you do that when you tell me that it? And the guy's dumbfounded because, holy heck, out of the mouth of babes, I didn't realize that I was talking out of both sides of my mouth.
Right.
And usually it's because we're not self-aware. I had a guy invite me to meet with him the other day, and he wanted my advice on something. So I agreed to, and I met with him for 2 hours, and he was all interested in service and selflessness. And we met at a Starbucks, and and all that stuff. And so I did the best I can to give him advice. But I noticed that after I left, he didn't even offer to buy me a cup of coffee. He didn't send me a thank you note. I mean, I don't think he was a bad person, but he spent 2 hours telling me about how important service and selflessness and gratitude and being nice to other people was, and he felt no compunction, obviously, from taking 2 hours of my time that I offered him without even offering to buy me a cup of coffee. That's the way it's habits. We get in bad habits of unconscious, automaton behaviors, and that's how we ruin the trust without even knowing we're doing it. I find that when I tracked down all these problems in business, and I was a fireman and I used to run around, I didn't find evil people sitting there. I'm going to go out there and tell them I'm going to give them a raise, and then I'm not going to give them a raise. I didn't find people like that. I found some scared boss who's where, he's got to make his numbers, and so he runs out there and he says, guess what? If you guys make your numbers, I'm going to do my best, to try and get you a raise,
Yeah.
And then he can't get him the raise, and then that's what I find is people that are just frightened people that say whatever they got to get themselves through this today and through this situation. But I agree, absolutely. If you want to be perceived as trustworthy, know what you're saying, say whatever you say, do what you're going to say. In other words, I call it keep your promises. Absolutely. But let me give you something else that I think is critical to trust. Keeping promises is the most important thing, and you have to keep your promises to yourself as well. You start by keeping your promises to yourself and getting it. But another thing that I noticed that even where people who do keep their promises, I call it anticipate. Never make people ask. If you borrow $10 from me, Pete, and you tell me you'll pay me back in a month, and at the end of the month, you're not late, but it's the last day and the last hour, and I come to your office and I say, Pete, you going to give me that $10 back? Can I get, hey, by the way, do you have that $10 you owe me? You've lost half of your credibility with me. You've made me come looking for that money. Now, you might have had the money right in your pocket and you were intending to give it to me, and it's no big deal, but I'm going to walk away thinking, you know what, that SOB, if I hadn't come looking for it, he would have never given me that money. He was hoping I forgot about that $10. So in every area of your life, if you anticipate your obligations, get out ahead of your obligations and go to the person and say, listen, it's only the 29th of the month, but here's that buck I borrowed from you. Mm-hmm. Or I know you're coming up for review in 2 weeks, but hey, I want to schedule if you make your employee come to you and say, listen, hey, by the way, I'm up for review. How about, can I get on your calendar to talk about it? If you instead go to him and say, hey, you're coming up for review, I want to get you on my schedule and talk about it. Guess what? The absolute thing is the same. We're going to have this review. There's a meeting. So in a sense, objectively, nothing's changed. But the emotions have changed tremendously.
Yeah, that is
you've by going to you and saying, listen, Pete, I know you're up for review. I am showing you how important I think you are. If I make you come to me and ask for the appointment, I'm indirectly telling you, I don't really think you're all that important.
So good. So I know we're taking a lot of your time, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. But I guess what I get asked a lot now with teachers, if you know the statistics on turnover right now and burnout for the teachers in general, it's disturbing, and a lot of stress, a lot of demands being placed on teachers to be social workers, psychologists, the accountability, new technology coming in. There's just so much bearing down on them. They always feel like it comes from the federal to the state to the school district to the building, and then they're at the short end, it all comes downhill to them. And stressed out and burned out. Is there anything that you see in terms of handling stress or burnout or this feeling of overwhelm that sometimes people get in corporations, especially now? The flattening of corporations has really put a lot of pressure on middle managers and leaders. Is there anything that you would say would be a useful technique or a hint or something you could help that would help these people deal with this situation?
Well, I'm not much on techniques and hints. I mean, they end up being band-aids and patches that you're putting on, you know. Uh, what I say in my book, and I really believe it, is you have to, no one should be rooted completely in their job. You should have something. What is it you fall back on? What is it that's bigger than your profession and your business? With me, it was always my spiritual life. Um, you know, I always had, you know, I was always in a larger context. Business for me or my job was always, like I said, it was a way for personal development. It was a way for me to act on my beliefs and things like that. It was not the be all and end all. So as my job goes, so goes my life. You know, so I think that number one, the most important thing is to have your something to fall back on. Something that's more of a technique that I use tremendously is I always saved money. I don't care how little money I was making. I figured out a way to save money. And as my father used to say, you know, my dad ended up with, he retired. My dad was, you know, $38,000 a year when he retired at 75. That was 1995. My dad had 8 children. That was the most money my dad ever made. And my dad left a $2.5 million stock portfolio behind when he died. And he didn't do it because he hit the lottery by getting Microsoft when it came public. No, he put nickels and dimes that he scraped together all his life and let, you know, as Warren Buffett said, you start with a small snowball on a big enough hill and you can make it into a big hit. But he told me that, he said, Augie, he said, you always pay yourself first every month. He said, the first check you write is to your savings account. He said, and if there's not enough money, then you'll cut back on the expenses. Most people do it the other way. They pay their expenses and then. And the reason I'm emphasizing savings is that a lot of times it's, you know, the anxiety is compounded because if you finally end up telling somebody off or say, listen, I don't like the way this is being going, or speak up, and then you lose your job and you have no money in the bank, that it compounds the stress tremendously. So I think that's the as far as the overall stresses and strains of what I understand, so many teachers are going through this. I don't have any magic bullet that I can say that, but I do think that you know, that you have to have something bigger in your life that is more, you know, family, spirituality, something like that that is bigger than your job, or you'll let your job eat you up.
Mm-hmm. So it all comes back once again, and it's just so far into the way we work with leaders right now, in education at least. It's not how smart you are, it's not how much you know, but it's who you are as a person. It all comes back to your personal attributes and your dispositions and who you are as a person.
You know, absolutely. You know, I mean, Viktor Frankl wrote his, you know, one of the nicest compliment I've got on Amazon about my book was some guy, actually I think it was a teacher as a matter of fact, but he said, he left a review and he said, the best book I ever read in my life was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He said the second best book I read was August Turak's book, you know, and I thought, oh my God, to be in that company is tremendously flattering. Well, I happen to have read and I know about Man's Search for Meaning. He wrote that at Auschwitz. Wow. He was in Auschwitz. And he would be working or whatever they were making him do there, walking around day after day. And he wrote that book in his head and committed it to memory. And when he got out of Auschwitz, he wrote it down as a book. So if he could take an environment like Auschwitz and turn it into a creative place where he could write a book, you know, this is the thing that I see with the monks all the time. I mean, they're living in a situation where it looks so mundane, even boring and monotonous and repetitive, yet they're extremely creative. And as I said, they do everything they do with a prayerful attitude. You know, in the Catholic Church, they talk about offering it up. You can offer it up. Now, you know, I don't care if you're an atheist. You've got to have something that you go in there every day and you're offering it up. You know, it's like the Alcoholics Anonymous thing. You know, it's not about me. It's you know, you have to have the ability to say, listen, let me do the things that I can do, and then the rest I just got to let go.
Augie, thank you so much for spending this morning with us and spending the time. Your passion comes through, your clarity comes through. So you are the embodiment of what you're talking about, and that's
Thank you.
the ultimate compliment, because what you're talking about is extremely important for educators and for educational leaders, and for our kids.
I like to leave you with one real quick
Sure.
anecdote, though, which kind of is the good and the bad and the ugly of teaching. My father was a teacher, and one day he came home, and and I was only 12 years old, and he said he had a personality test, and he had me take this personality test. He was actually working in business at the time, he taught school at night. But so he had me take this personality test, and the personality test came back and said that I should be either a teacher or a clergyman or a salesman, and I've been those are the three things that I think come absolutely closest to me. So I have a tremendous. Now the thing that was the bad side of it is my father was angry with me because I scored so low on engineering. And his attitude was that I should be this perfect person. I remember even at 12 years, I said, "Dad, it's a personality test. It's an aptitude thing." So I really resonate with you and with the people that are teaching, and God bless you. It's the most important.
Well, kudos for using your gifts and sharing them with us. And please, everyone, take a look at. I'll put the link on the website, but the Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. This is a fantastic book. Thank you, Augie.
Thank you, Pete.